I came home after a 15-hour shift hoping to see my daughter asleep and dinner on the table. Instead, I found my little girl curled up on the floor of her bedroom while a boy I barely knew snored on her bed. In the kitchen, my husband and a woman who wasn't me shared a pot of soup. She wore my robe. He didn't even look surprised when I walked in, just said, "Oh, you're back." That was the moment I realized I wasn't exhausted. I was being erased from my own home, my own family, my own story, and the woman replacing me. She smiled like she'd already won. She should have known better. Heather didn't flinch when I walked into the kitchen. She ladled another spoonful of soup into her bowl, like she belonged here, like this was her house, her family, her moment. I stood there still in scrubs, my feet throbbing the bitter cold of the outside world clinging to my skin, and not one of them looked up to ask if I was okay. Dylan finally muttered, "Ella's fine. Logan's staying over again. Hope that's okay." I looked at the two bowls on the counter, both full, and then at the single dirty plate in the sink. Mine. The one they didn't bother setting aside for me. "You're letting her son sleep in Ella's bed again?" I asked, voice low. Heather licked the spoon. "Logan has trouble sleeping on the floor. Poor thing's so sensitive, so you put my daughter on the floor." She didn't mind, Dylan added quickly, like that made it better. I didn't answer. I walked to Ella's room and found her exactly as I had earlier, curled in a corner with her old blanket, a tiny pillow under her head. Her arms were folded across her chest, even in sleep, as if bracing herself against something. I picked her up gently and carried her to my parents' place that night, without saying a word to either of them. It didn't start there, of course. It never does. Heather Collins began as just a mom friend. Our daughters were in the same pre-K class, and she was one of those women who always showed up with snacks, bright lipstick, and stories that made other moms feel inferior. She volunteered for everything, brought Pinterest-level crafts to every event. Logan had allergies, sensory issues, tantrums, but she always had an excuse ready. "He's just sensitive," she'd say always with a sigh that begged for sympathy. I didn't pay her much attention until Dylan started mentioning her more than me. Heather said Ella's school is too academic. Heather knows a great pediatric dentist. Heather thinks maybe we're pushing Ella too hard. At first, I brushed it off. I was working 60 hours a week, and if Heather wanted to help with the kids' play dates or drive Logan and Ella to soccer, fine. But then her shoes started showing up by our door, then her jacket. Then the mornings I came home early, I'd find her already inside in my kitchen barefoot and smiling. "She just dropped Logan off," Dylan would say. With her keys, I tried to talk to him about boundaries, about how Ella had been acting out, not sleeping well, about how I felt like I was being pushed out of my own home. "You're always so dramatic," he said. "Heather's the only one actually stepping up while you're gone." That stung more than I expected. So I started paying attention, and what I found broke something in me. Heather had posted photos on Instagram of our backyard, our dining room, even our family cat curled up beside Logan. One caption read, "Feels like home." Another, "This is what a real family looks like." In the background of one, Ella's drawing was taped to the fridge. Heather had signed it Logan's art. She was erasing us one day at a time. I didn't confront her right away. I watched. I collected screenshots. I checked our shared credit card account and found charges for diapers, prenatal vitamins, maternity leggings. We only had one child, and she sure as hell wasn't pregnant with mine. The confirmation came from a careless text on Dylan's phone. My OB thinks it's a boy. Logan will be so excited to have a brother. There was no name, but I knew that voice. Heather. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I took the next day off, called Erica, and said I need to talk about divorce custody and getting my house back, and I started packing. Erica didn't blink when I told her everything. She took notes calmly, professionally, as if women walked into her office every week with stories about husbands giving away their daughters' beds and mistresses wearing their robes. "Do you have financial records?" she asked. "Yes. Screenshots, hundreds. Proof of pregnancy, working on it." She looked up. "We'll need to move fast. You want the house, you want custody, you want peace. That means you play clean, but you play hard." I nodded. I'm done being polite. Back at home, Heather had started nesting. She brought in throw pillows that didn't match anything, reorganized the pantry, and moved Logan's things into Ella's drawers. I came home once to find her building a bassinet in the living room, her hand resting over her still flat stomach like some twisted performance. Dylan barely acknowledged me. "Heather's just staying here until she gets settled," he said. "She's building a crib. She said it's temporary." Ella clung to me more each day. She started asking to sleep at my parents' house. She cried at night wet. The bed stopped eating carrots because Logan says they're for babies. I kept track of everything. Photos, receipts, her sleep schedule, her regression. The final straw wasn't the crib. It wasn't the groceries that disappeared or the prenatal appointments charged to my card. It was the afternoon I came home early and found Heather yelling at Ella. "Stop whining, Logan doesn't cry when he falls down." I stepped into the room before she could say another word. Heather turned, startled. "Oh, hi. I didn't hear you come in." "She's 4, I said, picking Ella up and holding her tight. "She's allowed to cry." Heather tried to recover. "I was just trying to toughen her up. It's good for kids. She's not yours to toughen." Dylan didn't say a word. He sat on the couch watching us like a man who'd already surrendered everything worth fighting for. That night, I moved into my parents' house full time. Erica filed the paperwork the next morning. The thing about leaving is people think it happens in a dramatic moment, a slammed door, a scream, a suitcase dragged into the street. But it doesn't. It happens quietly. It happens when you realize the place you built your life around is already gone and you're the only one left pretending it's still home. I told Ella we were going on an adventure. She packed her teddy bear, her blanket, and the pink sneakers she insisted made her run faster. At my parents', she slept through the night for the first time in weeks. I didn't. I sat awake at the kitchen table, scrolling through Heather's posts. She'd started sharing ultrasound photos, tagging Dylan in captions like, "Our rainbow after the storm," and "Building our family with love." I forwarded each one to Erica. "Let them post," she said. "Every lie is another brick in our case." The next day, Heather messaged me. "I know you're upset, but this doesn't have to be ugly. We're a family now. You'll always be part of Ella's life, of course. But maybe it's time to let go. Let go." She was sleeping in my bed, raising my daughter, spending my money, and now she wanted my blessing. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened a new folder on my desktop and titled it "Reclaim Everything," because that's exactly what I planned to do. The day I served Dylan the divorce papers, he looked confused, like he hadn't seen it coming, like months of betrayal, manipulation, and silence hadn't been enough warning. He opened the envelope at the kitchen table, still wearing the sweatshirt I bought him last Christmas. Heather stood behind him, one hand resting protectively over her belly, the other clenching a mug that used to say, "Best Mom Ever." It had been mine. "You're really doing this?" Dylan asked, as if I was the one tearing something apart. Heather didn't speak. She just watched, lips pursed, eyes calculating. I stood in the doorway, calm, steady. "The house is mine. The bills are mine. Ella is mine. You two are squatters playing house with someone else's life." Heather scoffed. "We have a baby on the way. That means something." "Not in my house, it doesn't." She tried again. "Logan thinks of this as home. So did Ella until you gave her floor space and took her name off her own door." Dylan threw the papers down. "You're overreacting. We can work this out." "No," I said. "You can work on moving out." That night, I received a voicemail from Sharon, my former mother-in-law. "You always were dramatic, Madison. Dylan deserves better. Heather is kind and thoughtful. You just weren't there enough. Maybe if you'd put your family first." I deleted the message before she could finish. It was laughable, really. I'd paid every bill, bought every meal, kept the lights on while Dylan played the stay-at-home victim. And now I was the one being blamed for abandoning the ship they drilled holes in. Erica prepped me for court. They'll try to paint you as cold, detached, the career mom who wasn't present enough. But we have everything. Credit statements, photos, witnesses. We've got this. I kept my schedule clean. No late meetings, no skipped bedtimes. I documented every playdate, every dinner I cooked, every drawing Ella made that said, "I love you, Mommy," and I never let Heather see me flinch. She posted selfies in the mirror with captions like, "Building our future with love and strength." In the background, my curtains, my rug, my table. She was still playing the fantasy, but I had the receipts. Ella was quieter during visits with Dylan. She started drawing herself with just me and my parents. When asked to draw family, she never included Heather. One evening, after a supervised visit, the court monitor handed me a note Ella had written. It said, "Can I stay with you always, Mommy? I don't like that lady. She says I'm too loud." I didn't cry. I scanned it, added it to the folder, and tucked the original into a fireproof safe. A week later, Heather sent a message. "This is a toxic environment. For all of us. I think we should come to an agreement. We'd be willing to pay you for your share of the house. That way we can raise the boys in peace." The boys. I stared at that line for a long time. She already counted Logan. She was already claiming Ella. She already assumed I'd vanish. I replied with one sentence, "Start packing." And that was the last time I ever spoke to her directly. The eviction notice was delivered on a Thursday morning. Heather signed for it, confused, maybe thinking it was another baby product she'd ordered with my credit card. Dylan called me 3 times that day. I didn't answer. Erica said, "Let them flail. Let the silence hurt more than anything you could say." 2 days later, Heather posted a long message on Facebook. "Being a mother is the hardest job in the world, especially when people try to tear down what you're building out of love. Some women just can't handle being replaced." The comments were full of sympathy, clapping emojis, fake sisterhood. I didn't reply, but I saved the post. We went to court the following week. Erica stood sharp as a blade in navy blue. Dylan showed up in a wrinkled shirt. Heather came too, even though she wasn't supposed to be part of the hearing. She sat in the back row, heavily pregnant, one hand constantly on her stomach, like a shield, the other swiping through her phone without shame. Dylan tried to argue for partial custody, said I worked too much, that Ella deserved consistency. that Heather had a nurturing spirit. Erica stood and calmly listed every date Ella had been neglected, every dollar Dylan hadn't paid, every moment Heather had overstepped. She ended with, "My client isn't seeking revenge. She's seeking protection for her daughter and for the home she built alone." The judge nodded, asked a few questions, looked through the evidence, then ruled I'd get full physical and legal custody. Dylan could have supervised visitation pending review. The house was mine. The debts were his. Heather looked like she was about to stand up and scream, but she didn't. She just grabbed her purse, stormed out, and slammed the courtroom door. Outside, I exhaled for the first time in months. Ella met me at home with a handmade sign, "Welcome back, Mommy plus me house." We ordered pizza, painted our nails, and danced to her favorite pop songs in the living room. That night, I tucked her into her own bed. No Logan, no Heather, no shadows, just us. A few days later, Dylan tried to drop by unannounced. He stood outside the front door with a box of things, baby clothes, books, some of my old CDs, and mumbled, "I thought maybe we could talk." I didn't open the door. I simply said through the glass, "This house doesn't belong to you anymore." He stood there for a moment, then walked away. Heather gave birth not long after. A boy. The announcement was quiet this time. No hashtags, no public joy, just a tired photo on her private profile. No one commented. I didn't feel hate. I didn't feel victory. I felt clear. I had spent so long carrying the weight of being good. Good wife, good mother, good enough to tolerate being replaced. Now I carried only myself and my daughter, and a life no one else could touch again. The silence in our house was no longer heavy. It was peaceful. No raised voices, no passive-aggressive sighs, no toddler tantrums that didn't belong to me. Just the hum of the dishwasher at night, the thump of Ella's feet on the stairs, the soft rhythm of a life finally our own. I rearranged the furniture, painted the hallway, donated every blanket mug and spoon Heather had ever touched. Not out of spite, out of cleansing. It felt like reclaiming oxygen. Ella blossomed. Her drawings turned brighter. Her stories got longer. She stopped asking where Logan was or when she had to go back there. She stopped flinching at footsteps in the hall. One night, as we were baking brownies, she licked the spoon and said, "I like it when it's just us, Mommy." So did I. Dylan tried to stay relevant. He missed 2 of his first 3 supervised visits, sent vague excuses, claimed he was adjusting. Erica filed a violation report. The court sent him a warning. Heather didn't reach out, but people talked. At the preschool gate, someone whispered she was back living with her sister, that she'd posted a GoFundMe, that the baby had health issues, that Dylan had applied for delivery gigs and quit after a week. I didn't take pleasure in it, but I didn't feel sorry either. Choices have consequences, and so does stealing someone's family and thinking they'll let it go. One Saturday, I ran into Sharon Dillon's mother at the grocery store. Her hair was a mess. Her cart was filled with off-brand formula and clearance diapers. She looked older. She tried to pretend she didn't see me, but I walked straight past her Ella's hand in mine. Ella didn't recognize her. She didn't even pause. That was all the closure I needed. By spring, the garden in the back finally started blooming again. I planted new flowers with Ella Marigold's lavender snapdragons. She named each one. I stood at the edge of our small lawn watching her poke holes in the soil and fill them with seeds, her face scrunched in concentration. "You know what I think," I said. She looked up. "What I think this place finally feels like ours again." She smiled wide and sure. Because it is. By the time summer came around, it was clear to everyone, especially them, that I wasn't coming back. Heather had given birth. I knew because someone forwarded me the GoFundMe she set up titled, "Help Us Stay Together as a Family." It had one donation. From her cousin, $10. In the photo she used, she cradled the baby while Dylan stood behind her, expression vacant. The comment section was brutal. Most people remembered what she'd done. The algorithm never forgets. Meanwhile, Ella and I built a life. We started taking weekend trips, small ones, a cabin by the lake, a farm that let kids feed goats. She collected postcards and stuck them to the fridge with magnets shaped like fruit. Every night she asked the same thing. Can we stay here forever? And I always said yes. I stopped looking over my shoulder. I stopped checking Heather's posts. I no longer felt the urge to explain, defend, or justify. The people who mattered knew the truth. The people who didn't never really listened anyway. Dylan missed another supervised visit, then another. Eventually, he stopped confirming them at all. Erica sent the final notice to the court non-compliance with visitation schedule. No further interest demonstrated. The judge closed the file. Heather sent me one last message. I hope you're proud of what you've done. You broke up a family. You destroyed a child's future. And for what? So you could look like the better woman. I didn't respond. What could I say? That I hadn't destroyed anything that they had, that Ella was happy now, that I didn't need to be the better woman. I just needed to be the one who stayed true. Instead, I blocked her. Ella never asked about her father anymore. She stopped drawing him in her pictures, stopped mentioning Logan altogether. She was focused on swimming lessons, catching fireflies, and learning how to braid her own hair. One evening after bath time, she curled up beside me on the couch and whispered, "Do you think you'll ever have another baby?" I looked at her surprised. "Why do you ask? Because I like it when it's just us." I kissed her forehead. "Then that's exactly what it'll be." That night, after she fell asleep, I sat on the porch with a glass of wine and watched the sky turn a deep purple. The house was quiet but never empty. It was full of everything I'd fought for: safety, honesty, peace. I had reclaimed every square inch of my life, and no one would ever take it from me again. By mid-July, the heat settled over everything like a quiet truth, unavoidable, steady, honest. I stopped waiting for another shoe to drop. There were no more shoes. I'd already walked through the storm barefoot. Ella was thriving. She finished preschool and got accepted into a charter elementary we both loved. The uniform made her look so grown up, but her backpack was still too big for her body. She didn't mind. She called it her power bag. I volunteered for the school's garden program, helped paint the fence with other moms who didn't ask questions I didn't want to answer. We shared sunscreen, swapped lunch ideas, and sometimes just sat in silence watching our kids chase bubbles in the grass. One afternoon, while Ella played, a woman asked me, "Are you married?" "No," I said simply. There was no need to explain, no shadow behind the word, just fact. At home, Ella made signs for every room, reading zone for the hallway, quiet thinking area for the laundry closet. She'd become her own architect, designing comfort in the places she once felt small. She never spoke about Dylan. I didn't bring him up. Heather stayed gone too. A mutual friend mentioned she'd moved back to her hometown, something about a custody fight with Logan's father, some financial trouble, a breakdown. I didn't ask for more. It wasn't bitterness that kept me from caring, it was distance. I'd traveled too far forward to look back. I started sleeping better, deeper. I read entire books again. I had time to repaint the bathroom, donate old clothes, buy myself new ones without feeling guilty. Freedom didn't roar. It whispered, in small choices, in morning coffee with no interruptions, in Ella's spontaneous hugs, in weekends with nothing to recover from. One Sunday morning, as I was making pancakes, Ella looked up from her coloring book. "Mommy, yes. Are we a happy family?" I smiled, flipped a pancake, and answered the way only someone who's rebuilt from rubble truly can. We are now. The anniversary came and went without ceremony. 1 year since the night I found Ella asleep on the floor. 1 year since I stood in my kitchen and realized I'd disappeared from my own life. I didn't mark the date with wine or tears. Just a long walk with Ella through the park where she pointed at ducks and told me which one was the leader mom. She didn't know the weight that day used to carry, and she didn't need to. That was the gift. She didn't remember the pain because I had taken it away from her. I hadn't heard Dylan's name in months. There were no more emails, no more court notices. It was like he'd melted into the past, unreachable, unremarkable. Heather, too, had gone silent. No more posts, no new pictures. The internet moved on, and so did we. I'd started writing again. Just little things, essays, memories, half-formed stories I never shared with anyone. It felt good to have words that belonged only to me. Ella learned to ride a bike. She fell once, scraped her knee, then got up and said, "I want to try again." I clapped so hard I startled a squirrel out of a bush. She laughed. I laughed. We were so full of joy, there wasn't room left for grief. One afternoon, I sat in the backyard with a cold drink and my feet in the grass. The sun was soft, the wind steady. Ella was inside painting something she said I couldn't see until it dried. When she finally brought it out, it was a picture of our house. Just the two of us. Flowers blooming everywhere. There was a quote at the bottom, carefully copied in her wobbly handwriting, "You are safe. You are loved. You are home." I didn't cry. I just held her close and whispered, "That's exactly right." Because it was. By fall, even the shadows felt softer. Ella started first grade with a new backpack and an even newer smile. She woke up on her own now, brushed her teeth without me asking twice, and picked out her clothes with serious conviction. I still laid out backup outfits, but she rarely needed them. She was becoming her own person. One crisp morning, we walked to school under a sky full of golden leaves. She skipped ahead humming and suddenly turned around. "Mommy, yeah, baby." "Do you think people change?" I paused. "Sometimes, but sometimes they just reveal who they really are." She nodded like that made perfect sense. I'd stopped wondering whether Dylan or Heather ever regretted anything. Regret wasn't my business anymore, and redemption wasn't my burden to witness. That same week, I received a letter from the state Dylan had officially relinquished all parental rights. No more shared decisions. No more legal entanglements. It was done. I stared at the paper longer than I meant to. Not because I felt lost, but because I finally understood how far I'd come. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't sad. I was still. I folded the paper neatly, placed it in the same fireproof box where I kept Ella's drawings and the court ruling, and shut the lid for good. That weekend, I hosted a small gathering, just a few moms from Ella's school and their kids. There was laughter in the kitchen, juice boxes on the porch, and Ella racing through the house with her friends, her voice high and happy. At one point, I caught my reflection in the window. I looked peaceful, not powerful, not fierce, just whole. That night, Ella curled into my lap, her hair damp from the bath, and said, "You smell like cinnamon and clean clothes." I smiled. "That's my superhero scent." She giggled. "Then you're the best one." In that moment, I realized I didn't need revenge. I didn't need anyone to suffer. I just needed this, right here. The house we rebuilt, the girl I protected, the woman I finally became. The year closed the way a good story should, not with noise, but with clarity. I didn't throw a party. I didn't write a post. I just lit a candle on a quiet December night and watched Ella build a snowman in the front yard, her red scarf trailing behind her like a ribbon in the wind. Inside our home was warm. A new rug in the living room, fresh paint on the walls, a bookshelf I'd finally assembled after months of saying next weekend. Every corner held a piece of us, not what we'd survived, but what we'd built after. People sometimes asked, "How did you do it?" I never gave them the full answer, because it wasn't just one thing. It was 100 small decisions made in silence, made when no one clapped or noticed or cared. It was choosing not to scream when screaming would have been easier. It was walking away with my head high while my heart limped behind me. It was Ella's hand in mine, every day. On New Year's Eve, she stayed up late for the first time. We counted down with paper hats and sparkling juice, then stood on the porch and listened to fireworks crackle in the distance. When midnight struck, she turned to me and said, "This is the best year ever." And I believed her. Not because everything was perfect, but because everything was honest. In that moment, I realized I didn't need closure. I'd created something better, a life where no one could replace me, a home that didn't require apology, and a daughter who knew love as something steady, not something she had to earn. As we walked back inside, she squeezed my hand and whispered, "Let's never go backward." I bent down, kissed her forehead, and answered, "We never will."